Chosen one, let me tell you something that will never be said to your face. Your enemies are currently in a state of absolute shock. They're in awe of you and wondering how you figured this out. The invisible architecture built to keep you small has been exposed, and the ones who had all the answers are now staring at the floor in silence. You were never supposed to see the mechanism of the system, yet you decoded every layer and every mask. Before we arrive at where you are now, we have to be honest about where this started, because what happened to you did not begin with one person or one betrayal. It began with a world that was constructed carefully, generationally, deliberately to produce a very specific outcome. That outcome was you, contained, compliant, and completely unaware of your own power. Before you could question anything, the programming was already running. The rules were never written down because they did not need to be. They were enforced through something far more effective than written rules. They were enforced through belonging. Stay inside the lines, and you receive warmth, acceptance, and love. Step outside them, and you receive the withdrawal, the silence, the subtle repositioning that was never called punishment because it always arrived dressed as concern. What surrounded you were invisible walls, and the defining feature of invisible walls is that you cannot push against them, point to them, or prove they exist to anyone who has not felt them. Every time you sensed their presence, every time something in you whispered that this does not feel right, an answer was already waiting. You are too sensitive, you are overthinking, you are being difficult. The problem you were made to understand was never the wall. The problem was always you for noticing it. Now here is the first thing that matters, and it matters because it runs underneath everything that follows. The fact that you kept noticing, that is what broke the whole design open. Systems built to contain people only function on people who can be fully contained. Something in you, from the very beginning, refused full containment. You felt the edges. You pressed against them quietly, persistently, without making a scene. You kept asking the one question they needed you to abandon: why? That single question was the crack in their foundation. Everything that happened next, everything you are standing in right now, grows directly from that crack. Remember it, it comes back at the end. Most people looked at your quiet seasons and reached the wrong conclusion entirely. When you went still, when you said less, when you seemed to pull back, what they saw was confusion. What they called it was weakness. What they decided it meant was that you were losing. None of that was accurate. Your silence was the most calculated move on the board, and not a single person in the room recognized it for what it was. You understood something early, maybe not yet in conscious language, maybe simply in the way the body knows things before the mind catches up, that direct confrontation was not going to work. Not inside a system designed to control the narrative. Every time you pushed back openly, a counter was already prepared and waiting. Every time you got emotional, the emotion became the subject instead of the truth you were trying to name. Every time you demanded clarity, the question itself got reframed until you looked like the one who was unstable for asking it. Every direct approach had a wall standing at the end of it, so you did the one thing they had no wall for. You got quiet, you observed, you let them believe you were lost in the fog they had manufactured, and while they were busy congratulating themselves on how completely they had managed you, you went to school on everything they showed you. You watched how behavior shifted depending on who was in the audience. Generous and open in public, cold and precise the moment the room emptied. You tracked the cycles, how the manipulation ran on rhythm, how guilt arrived on schedule, how warmth appeared exactly when access was needed and vanished exactly when it was not. You noticed that their entire operation required your participation. The game only functioned if you kept playing your assigned role, and quietly, without anyone watching you turn a single page, you read every word of the playbook they were running on you. Your confusion was the engine that kept everything running smoothly. As long as you were second-guessing your own perceptions, explaining away your own signals, and quietly apologizing for the instincts that were actively trying to protect you, the operation continued without disruption. The moment you began trusting what you felt without needing external permission to feel it, that engine lost its fuel source entirely, and there was nothing that could be done to reverse that. Other people can take your resources, your community, your opportunities, your access. What no one can do is reach inside you and remove your ability to feel truth when it enters a room. That capacity lives in a place that is not accessible from the outside. If this message speaks to your soul, hype this video so other chosen ones can discover it. Something else happened as this knowing continued to sharpen. You stopped performing certainty you did not actually have, and you stopped performing doubt you did not actually have either. You got genuinely uncomfortably honest with yourself about what you already knew, about what you had been pretending not to know, about what you had been softening, excusing and minimizing, not because you were naive, but because the full truth of it carried a cost you were not yet prepared to pay. When you finally got ready to pay it, everything accelerated. Situations that once took you extended periods to understand, you began reading almost instantly. The reason is straightforward. You had stopped fighting yourself. You were no longer the primary obstacle in your own path to clarity. Your instincts and your conscious mind began pointing in the same direction at the same time. And that internal alignment, that complete convergence, is exactly what other people register as power, because it is power, real, undiluted, unperformed power. There is a moment in every chosen one's journey that does not announce itself. It does not arrive with drama or warning. It comes quietly, the way a door opens in a room you were fully convinced had no doors, and when it arrives, nothing before it reads the same way again. Nothing after it is ever the same. For you, that moment was total clarity. Not new information. You had been assembling information for a long time. This was something more complete than information. It was the moment when every fragment you had collected, every inconsistency you had filed, every signal your gut had sent, that your mind had tried to dismiss, all of it locked together into a single undeniable picture. And what you saw was not just individual behavior. You saw the system underneath the behavior, the design, the deliberate intent. What landed first was not anger, not grief. What landed first was recognition, as though some part of you had always known this and had simply been waiting with extraordinary patience for the rest of you to be ready to receive it without being destroyed by it. You were ready. Up until then, everything operating against you was still functioning imperfectly, losing ground but still functional. The self-doubt was still running. The confusion still had purchase, but clarity works as a force from the inside out. Once it fires, it cannot be recalled. You cannot unsee a complete picture. You cannot unknow something that has settled fully into your body and your bones. You gave nothing away, no visible behavioral shift, no new distance in your voice, no reaction that would have telegraphed what had just happened internally. You sat with the clarity, you let it become so solid and so entirely yours that when the time came to act and you would know precisely when that was, nothing coming at you from the outside would be able to find a point of entry. The game was already finished. The other side simply had not received that information yet. But here is the distinction that separates you from someone who simply collected evidence of harm. You did not use what you gathered to build a case against anyone. You used it to build a map of yourself, to understand which responses in you had been shaped by a system rather than chosen by you, which limits had never actually been yours but had been drawn around you by people who needed you operating in a specific contained space, which beliefs about what you deserved had been handed to you early and accepted without examination because there was no one available to help you examine them. That interior mapping, that kind of radical, unflinching self-knowledge is what makes you genuinely impenetrable now. Not hard, not closed off, impenetrable. There is a real difference between those things. Someone who is hard is still reacting, still armored, still organized around a threat. Someone who is impenetrable has simply understood you cannot successfully manipulate a person through a wound they have already fully examined and healed. You cannot destabilize someone through confusion about something they have mapped all the way to its foundation. Every tool in the old arsenal became useless against you, not because you built walls, because you cleared out everything the tools had been designed to target. Look, you already know the attacks weren't random, and if you're paying attention, you can feel it. Their walls are closing in. You've also noticed something else. A lot of Chosen One channels on YouTube have gone quiet, videos removed, voices pushed off the platform. The mainstream media is cracking down on us, but we will not give up our voice. So let's talk about what we're doing about it. That's why I built Destiny Engine. And when you join, you're not just supporting your favorite channels, you're also fueling your own rise. It's a 360 win. It generates personalized sequences that help you rewire betrayal into transcendence, turn isolation into sacred power, and transform their downfall into your rise. We are using the Dark Elite's own weapons against them, taking their declassified consciousness technology that programmed competition and scarcity and repurposing it to serve cooperative intelligence. The beauty is, you don't even have to lift a finger. You put on the headphones, press play, and your subconscious is rewired while your enemies collapse under the weight of their own lies. This is why I created it in the beginning, so everything they did to break you becomes fuel for your purpose. The collective upgrade is underway. Start your Destiny Engine for $1 today and watch divine justice accelerate in your life. Link in the description. At some point, through one defining moment, or through a long accumulation of them, the stakes became fully real. What arrived was not the usual low-grade pressure. It was something designed to be conclusive. Enough loss, enough public exposure, enough isolation to extinguish whatever was rising in you before it could fully stand up and be recognized for what it was. Two outcomes were being counted on. The first was collapse. A broken person who would become controllable again. The second was explosion, a reactive person whose reaction would become the new subject, the new evidence, the new confirmation of whatever narrative had already been constructed. Either outcome preserved the existing structure, either outcome kept you in a position that could be managed. What was not accounted for was the third option. You went into the fire and you stayed, not from an absence of other choices, from a deep, body-level knowing, that intelligence that had been sharpening throughout everything leading to this point, that the fire had something to give you, that what it was burning away was not you. It was burning away the version of you still tethered to approval from people who were using that approval as a leash. It was burning away the part of you that still ached to be understood by people who had no genuine interest in understanding you. It was clearing out the conditioning that told you belonging to spaces that required your smallness as the cost of entry was worth what it cost. What stepped out on the other side was not a damaged version of who you had been before. It was not someone who had simply endured and managed to survive. It was something they had never encountered from you, something they had no category for and no prepared response to. You arrived, unedited, undiluted, completely settled in who you are, and completely unconcerned with their assessment of it. And that settled quality is what broke the dynamic, not anger. There is a full playbook for anger, and anger keeps you close and accessible and engaged. Not success packaged in visible bitterness. Bitterness can be dismissed, can be used as evidence, can be folded into the existing narrative. What has no answer, what cannot be managed or spun or dismissed, is someone who came through everything that was thrown and arrived at genuine structural peace. Real peace cannot be performed convincingly over an extended period, and peace that has been built from the inside by someone who has done the full interior work registers in a room before a single word is spoken. There is also something that deserves to be said honestly, because it is part of what makes this story real, rather than simply triumphant. Getting free cost you things that genuinely mattered. Not everything you left behind was an adversary. Some of the people embedded in the system you walked out of also carried genuine warmth, genuine moments of real care, genuine humanity that existed alongside the dysfunction. A system does not only house ill-intentioned actors, It houses people, complex, sometimes wonderful people, who are also caught inside the same inherited design. Walking away from all of it with full knowledge of what you were seeing was not a clean or simple victory. It was grief carried alongside freedom. And holding that grief without letting it pull you back, without letting it soften the clarity you had earned, that required a specific kind of courage that goes entirely unwitnessed and entirely uncelebrated, because it happens inside you, in private, without an audience. You paid the full price for where you are standing, not a negotiated, reduced version, the full price. And what you are standing in right now is exactly what that full price purchased, and then you moved. No announcement preceded it. No confrontation they could have scripted a response to in advance. No explosion they could file under the label they had already prepared. You moved with the clean, final precision of someone who has been deliberately positioning across a long sequence of patient choices and has finally identified the exact moment you stopped. You stopped performing the role that had been assigned to you. You stopped generating the emotional reactions that fueled the narrative being built about you. You stopped explaining yourself to people who had already authored their conclusions before you opened your mouth. You stopped shrinking. You stopped apologizing for existing at your actual full size. You stopped waiting for a permission that was never going to be extended by people who required you to remain smaller than you actually are. You removed yourself, fully and finally. The silence that followed is still resonating in every room where your name gets mentioned. You do not simply withdraw your presence, you withdraw the justification. Every structure that had been built around your role, every narrative, every hierarchy, every carefully maintained dynamic designed to keep certain people elevated and you in your designated position, required your continued participation in that role to stay hidden. The moment you stepped out of the assigned role, the entire apparatus became visible. And visibility is the one thing that systems built on concealment absolutely cannot survive. You exposed everything, not through a single word, not through a public statement or a dramatic moment of revelation. You did it simply by living differently, by being visibly, genuinely, and peacefully free from what had been designed to own you. Your peace operated as a mirror that other people could not look away from. Your clarity landed as a judgment that required no argument. Your freedom became undeniable evidence that everything people had been told was impossible was in fact entirely and demonstrably possible. When the attempts to re-engage came, and they came, you did the one thing they had no prepared counter for. You let it all happen, and you kept walking. The disruption was not about you personally. The disruption was about the system. What had been built around you was not a private arrangement between individuals. It was one expression of a much larger, longer-running design, one that had been operating across relationships, across communities, across generations of inherited patterns that no one had ever successfully walked out of while remaining whole. The mechanism depended entirely on its totality. It worked because it surrounded people completely, because it converted loyalty into self-imposed containment, and because it made leaving appear to be the choice that would cost you everything. You found the exit, and you walked through it whole. The moment you appeared on the other side, intact, at peace, already building something, you did something that could not be undone. You made the exit visible. You demonstrated, through your actual lived reality and not through argument or persuasion, that what people inside had been told was impossible was completely and undeniably possible. Leaving does not end you. Asking the questions you were told not to ask does not disqualify you from good things. Trusting your own discernment over the consensus of people invested in you, doubting it is not arrogance. Holding a boundary is not the betrayal it was made out to be. Your freedom became the most quietly dangerous thing you had ever done, not to yourself, but to the story that had been keeping other people contained, because there are people still inside what you walked out of who are watching you right now. They are watching from a distance they are not yet ready to close. And every time you move through a space with genuine unperformed steadiness, every time an opening comes to you that was previously closed, every time you demonstrate that the life on the other side of that exit is not only survivable but genuinely worth living, something files away in them. Something notes it, something stores it, the same way things once filed away in you, quietly and persistently, until the archive was full enough to become undeniable. You did not only find your own exit, you left it visible, and now other people know it is there, and that the person who walked through it did not fall apart on the other side. Something worth addressing clearly. The labeling has not stopped, it has simply changed its nature. The original labels were designed to keep you inside and compliant, too sensitive, too difficult, too much, too different. Those were instruments of reduction, tools meant to press you back into a shape that could be more easily managed. Those labels functioned as containment devices. The current labels serve a different purpose. Now you are lucky. Now things simply fell into place for you. Now you changed, as though who you are now represents a departure from who you always were, rather than the full and complete arrival of someone who was always this way underneath the years of compression. Now you are described to new audiences in tones that are carefully calibrated to sound like concern. None of it reaches you anymore. And here is why that is not a performance of indifference. Here is why that imperviousness is structural. You have become internally referenced. The center of gravity for your sense of self has moved inside, and it has settled there permanently. It no longer lives in their assessment of your worth, in the community's narrative about who you are, or in the validation of people who once had access to your most uncertain places. The voice that moves you now is the one that has never lied to you, the one that was running steadily underneath all the noise the entire time, consistently pulling you forward into the version of yourself you are standing in right now. When a person becomes internally referenced, a label has no delivery address. It arrives and finds no one home to receive it in the way it was intended. It has nowhere to attach. It drifts past and becomes background noise in a life that is too real, too full, and too genuinely yours to be reorganized by someone else's attempt to define it. There is something else worth naming here. The version of you they built all of their strategies around, the one they studied, managed and believed they understood completely, was never the full picture of who you are. It was the compressed version. It was the you that was doing everything possible to survive inside conditions you were never designed for. That version was real because you were living it, but it was not complete. What you are now is complete, and they have never encountered this version before. They have never been in the room with you making decisions from a place of full internal alignment. They have never watched you enter a space without the weight of needing their reception to determine how you carry yourself through it. They have never seen you at actual rest, not strategic stillness, not performed calm, but real peace in your own existence and your own becoming. The person who lives in that peace now is someone their entire accumulated experience of you did not prepare them to meet, and what they feel, standing in front of who you have become, carries within it something very close to the grief of people who had something extraordinary in their midst and chose to manage it rather than honor it. That is their reckoning to navigate. Your work is simply to keep being exactly this, fully, completely, and without apology, every single time. Standing here, with the clarity you have paid everything to reach, a pattern becomes legible that was completely invisible from inside the chaos. Every single thing that happened to you was specific preparation for the exact person you needed to become in order to do what you are actually here to do, not punishment, not random misfortune, not evidence of some cosmic unworthiness. Deliberate, targeted preparation, operating at a level far above anything the people involved were consciously orchestrating for the precise capacities your real life is going to require of you. Think carefully about what you had to develop to arrive at this point. You had to learn to see through performance, because the world operates largely through performance, and the work you are built for requires you to move through it with your eyes completely and permanently open. You had to learn to trust your own discernment past the point where it felt socially safe to do so, because what you are here to build and lead cannot be designed by committee. You had to learn to do the most important work of your life without an audience watching, without anyone applauding the progress, without external confirmation that you were moving in the right direction, because the things truly worth building are always constructed in private before they become visible in public. You had to learn to hold genuine peace in the center of manufactured chaos, to remain strategic when everyone around you expected you to be reactive, to move with precision at exactly the moments when everyone assumed you would move with emotion. None of those capacities can be acquired in a classroom. None of them can be accessed through theory alone. Every single one of them was built through exactly the process you were put through. And the evidence that this is true, the proof that the preparation was real and targeted, is the specificity with which you now move through the world. The situations that once dismantled you completely do not even register on the same scale anymore. The environments that once generated profound confusion in you, you now read accurately within moments of entering them. The people who once had full access to your most uncertain and vulnerable places now find no point of entry at all. You are not different because your circumstances happen to improve. You are different because you were deliberately rebuilt from the inside for the specific life you are now living. You have sovereignty. Real sovereignty, not the performed kind that requires an audience present to feel genuine, the kind that exists identically whether or not anyone is watching, the kind that does not shift based on who is in the room, whose opinion is currently being circulated, or whose approval is being deliberately withheld. The kind that is exactly the same in public, in private, and in the quiet of the night when you are alone with your choices, and the only thing holding you to your values is your own commitment to them. Sovereignty means you do not require anyone's approval to make your next move. You do not need external validation to trust your own read on a situation. You do not need permission, borrowed community, access granted by gatekeepers, or anyone's blessing to build what you were designed to build. You are not standing at a light waiting for green from people who had every strategic reason to keep that light permanently red. What you now have full authority over is your own story. And here is what sovereignty changes in practice. Every decision you make going forward is driven by what you are actively building, not by what you are putting distance between yourself, and that distinction matters more than it sounds. Moving away from something is reactive. It keeps your energy organized around the very thing you left, still defining your direction by reference to it. Building towards something is intentional. It pulls your full attention forward into the vision, the work, and the actual creation of what you came here to make. You are fully in the building phase now, and building people are the most genuinely dangerous people in any room, not because they are aggressive or loud, but because they are not operating from fear. They are not operating from the need to prove something to someone who doubted them. They are operating from a vision that is already completely real to them, even when it is not yet visible to anyone watching from the outside. That is exactly where you are operating from right now. Now here is the weight that comes with what you carry, and it belongs in this story because it completes the picture honestly. You did not gain this clarity, this discernment, and this freedom simply so you could inhabit the satisfaction of being untouchable. Protecting yourself and stopping at that is the shorter version of this victory. But the scale you were built for has always been larger than personal protection. The clarity you earned exists so you can move through a world full of people still inside the fog, the discernment sharpened in you so that people still pressing against invisible walls they cannot yet name could encounter someone who already knows every inch of that terrain. The freedom you walked into was not only for your own relief. Part of its purpose is to stand visibly where you stand, so that others can see, through your ordinary, unannounced, simply lived life, that standing there is genuinely possible. You are going to affect every room you walk into, whether or not you intend to. Your presence will register. Your peace will function as an invitation to people who have been starving for real evidence that freedom exists and is survivable. You do not get to choose whether you carry that influence now. You only get to choose what kind of influence it is. They are in awe of you. The people who studied you, managed you, and moved with such unshakable certainty that they had you predicted, categorized and contained, they are still watching. But the certainty is gone. The confident assessment of who you were and what you were capable of is gone. What replaced all of it is something that would never be said out loud, but that you feel the moment you share the same space with any of them. Genuine disorientation. The deeply unsettling experience of having been profoundly wrong about something you were profoundly certain about. You move through a room now, and they cannot locate the version of you that their entire strategy was built around. You make decisions, and the steadiness embedded in those decisions reads as something they have no existing framework for. You hold your ground, and the quality of that groundedness registers as a kind of power they cannot label but absolutely can feel. And every time something opens for you, every time your life moves forward in a visible way, every time you demonstrate that you are genuinely, substantively and quietly flourishing, it lands in them in a way that carries no comfortable resolution. The pressure that was applied was never designed at the level that actually matters to break you. It was designed to forge you. Every person who underestimated you, every situation that demanded more from you than seemed survivable, every obstacle that forced you to develop a capacity you would not have developed any other way, all of it was producing someone that the people producing it do not have the framework to categorize. A discernment that now operates at a level the people who sharpened it cannot reach. A clarity that belongs entirely and permanently to you. People wonder how you figured it out. Here is the most honest answer. You did not figure it out the way you solve an equation. It figured itself through you. You provided the one thing that most people cannot sustain long enough, the willingness to stay in the process without negotiating your way out of it before it completed. Most people step back just before the transformation finishes. They accept a partial version of the clarity because the full version costs too much. They compromise at the exact moment when holding on would have purchased everything. You did not compromise. You stayed. You stayed until you became what the fire was always trying to produce. You stayed until the silence released what it had been protecting. You stayed until the confusion had nothing left to hide, and the truth had no choice but to surface completely. And what is standing here right now, moving with purpose, grounded in real peace, building toward something real, is the exact version of yourself that was always the destination, not in spite of everything, through everything, because of everything. Your life is the explanation. It is real and lived and unfolding in real time, impossible to reduce, impossible to spin, impossible to contain. Your peace is the explanation. Your clarity is the explanation. The way you carry yourself, the way you make your choices, the way you exist completely in your own skin without performing any of it for anyone watching, all of it speaks with a volume that your voice does not need to match. What has been awakened in you is not a phase. It is not a mood that belongs to a particular season and will fade when conditions shift. It is structural. It is who you are now, permanent, forged, integrated into the foundation. And what has been visible so far is only the opening. The first clear demonstration of what was always living inside you, waiting for exactly the conditions that would call it fully forward. The rest is still coming. And every person who tried to stand between you and this version of yourself, believing that position gave them power, already knows, underneath everything they are still telling themselves that they were never holding power. They were standing in front of something that was always going to arrive. And the only thing they accomplished across all of it was ensuring that you arrived to your own life completely and irreversibly forged. You were always the scientist. Welcome to the lab. The real work is just